Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Drop me a quick note in the chat to let me know that you're on and that you can hear me and see me. Send me a quick note. And in fact, in your note, feel free to share. Go ahead and share with me, what industry do you work in and where are you located? Share with everyone here in the room. What industry are you working in and where are you located? Again, we'll just kind of do that quick, typical webinar intro for the first minute or so while other people join. But yes, Alex, welcome. Ready to go. Everyone's good to go. Douglas, thank you. Patricia, excellent. If you guys were here when I did this one a few weeks ago, because I decided to do this as an encore because there was such a great response. If you guys were here then, you probably remember we had some sort of strange audio situation going on. I think we're not having that situation today. That I hadn't experienced that before, and it seems to be all right now. Able to hear and see. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so QSR franchise, North Carolina. Thanks, Kareem. Compliance, remote work, Alex. All right, LaMonica, licensed professional counselor, right on. Let's see what else we have. I probably won't be able to shout out everybody, but I love to see that folks are joining from all over. Isabel, Austria Human Resources. Excellent, thank you. We've got Praga joining from South Africa. Welcome, welcome. Margaret, welcome. Jesus, welcome. Welcome, folks. I know we're joining from really all over. Let's see. Tawana, healthcare supervisor in North Carolina. We have a few folks in here from North Carolina as I'm seeing the names scroll through. Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome, Kelvin. Deborah. Marina. All right, other coaches in the house. I love it. Matt. Okay, so obviously we can keep on doing this. Let's see. And Marina, I see you're in the Netherlands. Awesome. Welcome. So we have folks joining from all over the place. And I think that is because this conversation, this discussion really, it spans every part of our lives. Oh, sorry. You know what? Hold on a second. So you guys said you can hear me, but it turns out I wasn't actually wearing the mic. So how's that? Is that even better? Let me see. Let me put this on. Okay. It doesn't look pretty, but hopefully you guys can hear me even more clearly. Okay. So I was saying I'd love to see where you're joining from because I recognize that the challenge of working with difficult people, because that's what we're talking about today, how to deal with the difficult people without losing your job or your mind. It seems to span kind of every industry, every corner of the globe. It doesn't matter what your level is, right? How many years of experience you have, what decision authority you have. It is just prevalent because the reality is, right, if we, we'll start with the actual, portion of the session in a moment, but I think about how important it is, right, for professional success, for personal success, satisfaction, for relationships that work, to be able to relate to people even if they're not the easiest to relate to, right? So our ability to handle, deal with, engage with, manage, supervise, report to, partner with difficult people is the avenue to whatever outcome we're looking for. I want you to really think about that, because it doesn't matter what your industry is, whether you are in something that you consider to be highly technical or you're in a purely relational type of industry. I maintain that the most challenging part of any profession is not the technical knowledge or aspect of it. Of course, that's important, right? We always want to be at the top of our game. But it's our ability to be with people who we don't necessarily like. Even sometimes people we don't necessarily respect. And that is really likely to be the biggest roadblock to us seeing the types of results, outcomes, opportunities that we want to see in our lives. So as I get started, I'm going to introduce myself in a moment, because I know I could just kind of launched right in, because this conversation really is so important for careers. It is so important for growth. It is so important for seeing your teams reach the levels you want to see them reach, to have the kind of board engagement and contribution that you're looking for. It's this conversation we're in right now. So we're going to get into it now. As we get started, I want you to go ahead and share in the chat. Go ahead and open up, the keyboard. Put your hands on the keyboard, and let me know, what is the impact? What is the impact or cost of working with difficult people? How do they impact either your results, your day, your mood, the team, the environment? What is the impact of working with difficult people? Go ahead and drop in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to look through more of your welcome notes. Let's see, Natalie and Danielle joining from Maine, Nyasha from North Carolina. Let's see, Health Equity Research Consulting, Nyasha. Oh, right on. Okay. Jean or Jean-Louis joining us from France, if I said that correctly. Let's see, Octavius from Atlanta, right on. I'm going to be in Atlanta in just a few weeks, Octavius. Okay, Vasti, it sounds like I'm frozen on your end, but I think we're still going. But y'all definitely let me know. Okay, so here we go. What's it like? What's the impact of difficult people? High stressful, uncomfortable, discouraging, absolutely. It impacts culture. It gets toxic. Yeah, it gets toxic very quickly. Reduced engagement and productivity, absolutely. It can be draining. Anybody else? It's draining. It's tiresome. You have people unwilling to engage. So there's lower productivity. Let me see. It impacts morale. We see it resulting in high turnover. Yeah, there's so much. There's stress, constant second guessing, overthinking. And just thinking about it, if you aren't constantly managing the worry over how to deal with this person and try to figure out how to just survive it, how much more productive, how much more innovative, how much more collaborative, right? Just how much more productive you can be when your brilliance is allowed to flow towards what you're trying to get it to flow towards, versus being hijacked by someone else's not so productive way of engaging. Let's see, there's resentment, sickness. Yes, absolutely. Anybody heard of the Sunday night blues? That's a lot of it. The Sunday night blues is not because you don't get the new tech yet. That's not why. The Sunday night blues is because you don't want to show up and engage in ways that leave you feeling drained and disempowered. Yes? Yeah, time vampires. And how about energy vampires? Right? Pushback, disagreements. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot. And again, this seems to affect us no matter what level we're in. So let's get into this conversation, because first of all, I'll introduce myself again, because I didn't do that and I got right into things. But for those of you who have not been in conversation or in a space with me before, my name is Bribiesca-Hedin. I am a professional leadership coach and trainer. I work with organizations, I work with individuals, I work with groups. And essentially the bottom line of what I do with them is helping them bring their best thinking and get out of their own way. So my background is in strategy, execution, and management consulting. So a lot of the slant and intention behind the frameworks I've created and how I take my clients through our coaching relationships has to do with becoming more intentional and strategic. Because all it means when we're talking about being strategic, it means we're making decisions in advance. We're making decisions on purpose. We're making decisions in line with what we want to see happen, right? I think that's the way that I like to think about being strategic. You're making decisions that actually move you closer to what you want versus like dragging you farther away from what it is that you want. So, that is me. Again, I started my career as a management consultant with Ernst & Young many years ago. And since then have been in and out of organizations, either partnering as an employee or partnering as an external consultant with senior leaders, helping them bring their top priorities to fruition, right? Because what I find is that, our big intentions, our big projects, our big initiatives, they're not derailed for a lack of passion or interest, right? They're derailed in the process of organizing people towards the common goal, right? Because that's what leadership is. And just so you know, again, if you haven't heard me say this before, my perspective on leadership, what leadership is that it has nothing to do with your title. And you've probably heard that before plenty of places. But I have a very specific way of thinking about it. And that is leadership, or a leader, is someone who elicits the best from themselves and others toward a common goal. That is it. That is a leader. It doesn't have to do with your span of control, your decision authority, your level, your years of experience and expertise, but rather whether you're showing up in a way where you're eliciting the best from yourself and from there eliciting the best from others toward that common goal. And this conversation today is going to also, you're going to see that kind of theme show up, because it's all about the quality of the decisions that we make. So we're going to go ahead and continue. So in general, we want things to go according to plan. Is that fair? In general, we want things to go according to plan. And what that typically means when we say that we want things to go according to plan is that we don't want to deal with the road bumps or roadblocks, and that includes with other people. So one of the things I say only somewhat facetiously often is, if you're only going to be effective when things are going according to plan, what are you going to do the other 90% of the time? Right? If you're only going to be effective when things are going according to plan, what are you going to do the other 90% of the time? And so, right, based on this conversation we're having today, if you're only going to be effective when other people behave the way you desire or the way you think they should, what are you going to do the other 90% of the time? What are we going to do? We're going to be like pushed to our limits every time that we're triggered. We're going to be reactive. We're going to lose our way and forget what we're actually there for and what we said is important. We're going to get derailed from the impact or contribution, the legacy, right? The up-leveling that we wanted to do and that we wanted to make possible for our teams, our organizations, our clients, our patients. Because that's the alternative, right? That's the alternative when we're only going to be effective when things go according to plan and other people behave accordingly. So let's keep going. And this is all about how we make decisions. So other people showing up not in a great way. I'm going to go back to this one, right? Other people showing up in a way that we don't desire, in a way that doesn't work for us, causes us to make decisions, right? And making decisions is what leadership is all about. And I promised I was going to simplify the conversation for today to make sure that we had plenty of time for Q&A. So I'm going to get right into this. But what I want you to understand is that there is no action or reaction, yes, without you making a decision. The problem is oftentimes the decisions you're making aren't being driven by something that serves you and that actually moves you towards what you said you want, right? On the contrary, oftentimes the decision sparking our reaction or our action is actually the one dragging us farther away from what we say is important to us. And so to help explain that and help you understand what's at the center of that, and hopefully even help you identify it in yourself and in others in your environment, I created a model called the decision driver journey. And that's the one you just saw a moment ago. So I'll bring it back on the screen. So the decision driver journey, this is a simplified version of it, but it really operates off of 3 dimensions, right? So the 3 dimensions are your experience as the leader or as the individual, your focus, meaning where most of your kind of mental capacity and brilliance is going, and then what's actually prompting or driving your decisions, and then as a result, your actions and your outcomes, because that's how that works, right? The outcome is always a byproduct of the quality of the decisions that we make. And so that's what this decision driver journey is about. So I'm going to dive right into it. At the bottom of the journey, we have what I refer to as the concerned citizen. Now, the concerned citizen, we get here typically after we've had a challenging, potentially bad spell at work, been making real attempts to get acknowledgement, to feel like our worth is being really seen and valued, like our contributions matter, but continuously feeling as though they don't, as though we're knocking it out of the park, but we're the only ones that seem to care. Does that resonate, you guys? It might also follow after repeated attempts at people pleasing, trying to get it right, and those failing. So in this space, there's this experience of being disempowered. Not just that, but the experience is one of being constantly at risk. So here we're shrinking back. We're playing really, really small. And that's all in an effort just to keep ourselves safe and out of the crosshairs of whoever or whatever it is that we think is causing our dismay, right? Being a risk to us. But here's the thing I want you to notice. Right now, while what's prompting your decisions is actually self-preservation and the desire for survival, yes, self-preservation, the desire for survival, decisions we make out of fear never actually have us feel more safe. So I want you to check in with yourself and see if that rings true for you. Decisions we make out of fear, in particular your professional decisions, I don't mean like physical safety decisions, that's a different conversation, but professional decisions we make out of fear do not actually have us feel more safe. And I want you to check in with yourself and then let me know in the chat if you can think of an experience where you made a decision out of fear and after making the decision, you actually felt more safe. Yes? Go ahead and check in with yourself and then let me know in the chat. Have you ever made a decision out of fear that after making the decision, you actually felt more safe? Because while you guys are sharing the chat, here's what I'll share with you. What I have found now, having this conversation with now tens of thousands, participants that have been exposed to the decision driver journey, is that when we make a decision out of fear, although the intention is to feel more safe, that's not actually the result. More often than not, right? More often than not, the experience ends up being one where we're even more finely tuned into everything else that can possibly go wrong. So check in and see if that resonates for you, because making decisions out of fear, that puts us in a space where we don't have access to collaboration. We don't have access to innovation and inspiration, right? What's accessible to us, I almost like to think about it as, what's driving your decisions right? The alternatives or the outcomes that are going to seem available to you. It's kind of like walking up to, you ever see those supermarkets and they're like a bunch of little vending machines with little different things inside each of the machines, right? You guys familiar with that? And then if you walk up to the machine that has like the little bouncy balls, what you're going to get out of the machine is one of the little bouncy balls, right? It might be a different color or design on it, but you're going to get a little bouncy ball. Now, if what you wanted was bubble gum, you're not going to get it out of that machine. And so the decision driver kind of works the same way. What's driving your decisions is that, your choice is that machine. And what the outcomes or the results and the options that seem accessible to you are going to be based on which one you walked up to. So if you walk up to making the decision out of fear and survival, you're going to get an option. You're going to have a limited range of options available to you no matter where you go, but that limited range is going to be driven by that machine you walked up to, being fear. And so those are often decisions that are going to result in you shrinking back and just playing it safe. Okay. So I hadn't thought about that vending machine, that, candy machine metaphor before, but let me know if that resonates. Let me know if that resonates. So, okay, I'm just looking at your comments. So I'm going to go ahead and continue here. Now, the next one, that's making decisions out of fear. The next one is the self-conscious careerist. Okay, so the self-conscious careerist, this is probably the closest we have to a default. It's probably the closest we have to a default. Now, here, a lot of our focus is on really our ego and our image and trying to look good and wondering what others might be thinking or feeling about us, right? So we're often particularly reactive in this space, at the level of the self-conscious careerist. And we're trying to do a whole lot of mind reading. We're literally constantly in our heads wondering what everyone else is thinking, saying, or doing about us, right? And not just that, then any time that someone responds or reacts or engages, we're wondering what it actually means, right? So we'll get into this space. We spend a lot of time in the, what did that smile mean? Why did they ask me the question that way? I wonder what's behind that. What did that raised eyebrow mean, right? Why was my name last on the list? What are they trying to say? So we're in this space of being particularly reactive because we're really kind of meaning-finding, meaning-seeking machines. And that meaning that we're seeking is whether someone else thinks that we're worthy or worthwhile or not, right? Isn't that a kick in the butt? So here we're literally neck deep in the validation trap, constantly in an effort to either people please or get the gold sticker from somebody else, right? We need to one up everybody. We need to be at the top of the list. We need everybody to agree with our idea, because if they disagree, we take it personally. It means that they don't value us. They don't like us. It's not enough that they were really just talking about that approach that we offered up and they had more questions about it, right? We respond in a very different way. So I'll go on to the next one. But, something I want you to know about the self-conscious careerist is that when we're there, we get so caught up in the validation trap that before you know it, you've given up your nights, your weekends, your goals, and sometimes your own personal aspirations and values to gain temporary validation from someone you might not even respect. So I want you to kind of let that settle in, right? Gaining validation from someone you don't even respect. So finally, we're going to go up to the top here where everyone wants to be. This is the chief strategist level. This is where most of our decisions, our mental focus, it's driven by something bigger than us, something outside of us. And you'll understand why that's so important in a second, right? But there is a bigger intention. And so the experience here tends to be one of kind of self-confidence, and not because we know how everything's going to go, but because we're more concerned in that bigger intention than we are in getting it right. See, when we don't make decisions driven by a bigger intention, by default, all that's left is getting it right. So I want you to try that on for a second. Just think about that. What's left is just trying to get it right. So what that means is that the first sign, if you're not making decisions from that top level, right, where you have this bigger commitment to a mission or purpose or intention or outcome that's truly more meaningful than being embarrassed or rejected or being disagreed with or the slides not working, or looking silly at the quarterly meeting, whatever the case is. When you don't have an intention or purpose that's bigger than that, we default to trying to get it right. And the folly with trying to get it right is that the moment anything doesn't work, we're done. Like all of our brilliance almost like leaves our brains and our bodies, and that brilliance is nowhere to be found, right? We become a crumple of reactivity and self-doubt and trying to show up in bravado and overbold to try to compensate for the fact that we lost our edge as soon as something didn't go according to plan. So now, all that said, I know that was a lot of information, and I want you to notice where you see yourself spending time. And then I want you to notice where you see the difficult people in your life spending time. Yeah? Where do you see the difficult people in your life spending time? Now, see, the decisions that difficult people make that have them show up as difficult, they live, as I like to put it, below the line. Their decisions are coming, okay. Their decisions are coming from below the line. So that is a perspective of it's all about me. Okay. So when you're making decisions down here, it is reactive. It's about, this has everything to do with me, and I'm either going to hide or I'm going to strike back or I'm going to show them how they're wrong, right? Because that's what's available when they're making decisions there. So I kind of conflated two conversations there. So let me clarify that for a second. When people are showing up as difficult, they're making decisions from below the line. Yes, they're reactive because they do think everything is all about them. But the other side of that is that when you feel yourself reactivated by difficult people, yes, and you're actually engaging with them as though there's some logic behind what they're doing, and as though you need to convince them out of the logic or show them the error of their ways or demand that they treat you with respect or show up in a timely manner, because somehow it means something about you. Yeah. And whether or not they respect you, then you're also showing up down here. Can you guys see that? When it becomes all about me, right? So the way that they're behaving, it's about me. So of course, if it's about me, I'm going to have to react. I'm going to have to show them, how mistaken they are. I'm going to have to show them that it's not okay to have that perspective. I'm going to have to show them that, there are severe consequences for being late, even though there are no meetings, they don't take phone calls. It's not that kind of role, because we've turned it into being about us. On the contrary, when someone shows up in that space and they're being difficult because they're there below the line and they're trying to one-up you, they're trying to have the last word, they're trying to be right even if they're wrong. How many of you, does that resonate? Someone in your life who has to be right even when they're wrong. And then we engage with them as though they're being rational, even though we know they're wrong. Maybe even they know they're wrong, but they can't see their way to engaging on a rational level. And yet our reactivity calls us to get into it with them, to respond from below the line, because that's where they're coming from. Because I'll show them, I'm not going to let them get away with that. And I want you to notice that you don't respond the same to every difficult person. Not every difficult person presses your buttons, because I will bet you there are people who act a fool all over the place all the time, and you just let it roll right off you, right? You just let it roll right off you. Like it's not an issue. But there's something about that person. Like you have to show them. You have to show them how wrong they are. You have to show them. But here's the thing, the part that's telling you I have to show them is you below the line. Because let me tell you something. If you were making decisions, right, from above the line, you know your purpose and the reason you're there is to show this person what's right. You know that that's not what you're there for. The problem is difficult people left unchecked, they're like spam for our intentions, right? Just like spam and like pop-ups, like when you're online. I liken it to when you go online to research something for a big presentation you have tomorrow, right? And you're in there, actually you're researching, and then a pop-up shows up. And before you know it, you're taking a freaking quiz about what kind of Disney princess you are. That is spam. But difficult people show up as spam for our intentions, our goals, our careers, our impact, our contribution. And so you need to figure out how to create your own spam blocker. Yes, because they're not going anywhere. You can try to correct them all you want. And there are a couple things I can guarantee. One, you're probably going to make yourself ill doing that, right? Trying to have people be right or show up right. Yes, you're probably going to make yourself ill. And the second part is not only are you making yourself ill, but you've now completely dragged yourself away from what you were actually there for, which was what? Either to contribute at a higher level, right? To help get the initiative to the finish line sooner, to distinguish how to elicit the best from yourself and others toward a common goal. But that's what happens when our efforts get hijacked by people showing up below the line and us responding from below the line. When we realize we have nothing to prove to the difficult person, we can almost see it as almost like there's a little bit of empathy there. We can almost see it as a little bit amusing. I don't know if you guys can see that. You can almost see it as a little bit amusing. And that's because you have some understanding of where they're coming from and that it has nothing to do with you. Because see, the biggest folly is believing that other people's reactions and attitudes has something to do with us. Now, here's the thing. You always need to be responsible for how you show up, right? Or whether you're prepared, having an engaging attitude, welcoming interaction, trying to contribute, trying to listen. Of course, we're professionals. We're always going to be responsible for that and for how we show up in that way. Yes? But we're not going to be responsible for someone else's response. And when you believe you are responsible for someone else's response, then of course, by all means, you're going to go out of your way to try to show them how wrong they are or how right you are or how inappropriate that was and how they shouldn't have gone down that path and how that you're going to take it personally. It means they don't respect me. They don't value me. And so I'm going to respond in kind. If they respected me, they wouldn't get here late. They respected me. They respond to my email, the first time I send it, right? We make it about us instead of, if we're responding from above the line, let's just say you're not getting the response you need from a board member. What might you do if now you're making decisions from above the line? If you're being strategic and you're realizing that what you want in this case from that board member is for them to understand the importance of what you guys are working on and the importance and critical piece to their contribution and why their contribution is so important, right? So that's what I want you to connect with. When you're making decisions from above the line, it changes everything. Now, here's what I know. When people are making decisions from below the line, it is because one of three primary leadership pillars are missing, right? And this is based on the framework that I use with all of my clients, right? So we were just talking about this. Difficult people live below the line. Your reactive response, yes, lives below the line. Strategy lives up here. Strategy does not come from looking good. It does not come from fear or survival. So let's go on to, these are the three pillars of mastery. These are in all of my programs. If you work with me one-on-one or in group, and don't worry about trying to memorize everything on here. I'm going to walk you through it very briefly because I want you to understand what this means and why people show up the way they do when one of these are missing. Yes? So these are the three pillars of mastery. So the first one, right? We talked about the decision drivers. And that very first pillar is about self-mastery. And that's where decision drivers live. So let me go on. Let me see. I think I had it highlighted here. Yeah, I did. So self-mastery, bottom line, it's about knowing yourself. It's about understanding where you get in your own way. Like, honestly, where other people in situations who are not living up to your expectations hijack your leadership effectiveness. This is why they become spam to your goals, right? Why they're the roadblocks to your intentions. They hijack your capabilities because you don't have self-mastery. Yeah. And they're showing up without when they don't have self-mastery, they're showing up constantly reactive, constantly trying to prove something, right? They have low self-confidence, limited resilience, so many blind spots, right? Everyone else can see the way they're showing up and how it's derailing and impacting efforts, but they can't. They don't have that perspective into themselves. Now, the next one is role mastery. So role mastery is about knowing what's actually important for success in your role or career. It's knowing your role versus being guided by what's on the values pillars in the break room or what's on your job description, right? You need to understand how to audit for enacted or real priorities versus the marketed priorities, again, that are talked about and that are on the recruiting posters and things like that. Because I'm not saying organizations are trying to mislead you. What I am asserting is that what's on those posters, it's what's aspirational, meaning what they want to see happen, right? The future they eventually want to get to. But it's not what's actually important and what's actually prompting meaningful decisions in the organization. This is why sometimes you'll look around and the people getting promoted are not a reflection of those values. Does that resonate, you guys? Let me know if that resonates. The people getting promoted are not a reflection of those values and of those things the organization says is important. And that's why, because you don't have role mastery. You don't actually have clarity and awareness about what's driving decisions and prompting investment in that organization and priority in that organization versus what they say. So I'm going to go on to the next one. Goal mastery, or also called leadership goal mastery. Now, goal mastery, this is all about having a strategic plan for your career and being able to plan for and manage when things go off the rails, because things will go off the rails. Yes? Because when we don't, here's the thing I want you to understand. When you don't have a strategic plan for your career becomes a series of reactions to whatever else is going on around you. Yes? It becomes a series of reactions to the pandemic, to the reorg, to whether your boss likes you or not, to whether that client was difficult, whether the board members are responding. Your career is not intentional. it becomes the result of you just trying to, madly react to whatever it is that's happening. It's such a disservice, right? It's such a disservice to your leadership effectiveness, to your career, to your aspirations, to what you said is important, to the results you say you want to create, to how you want to engage and up-level your team. When all you're doing is reacting, there's not room for any of that, right? And here's the thing. So you guys, again, I didn't put it in here, and I meant to put it in here after the last one, but I want you guys to write this down. If somebody drops it in the chat, I appreciate it. The only thing more important than knowing where you fit in your organizational strategic plan, because you need to know that, is knowing where they fit into yours. You guys with me? The only thing more important than knowing where you fit in your organization's strategic plan is knowing where they fit into yours. There's a lot in that statement. Not only do you need to understand what's happening in your organization, what their priorities are, and where your department, function, or role fits into that or not, but you also need to understand, most importantly, your strategic plan and where your organization fits into that. See, sometimes the role we're in is a deliberate stepping stone for where we know we're going. And sometimes it's just the place we ended up. But you need to have a strategic plan in order to distinguish which one it is. Okay? You need to understand, because you can't treat all roles, even all relationships, as equal. Yes? Well, you're going to deal with a difficult partner or spouse in one way, you're not going to deal with the difficult temp in the same way. Yes? So I'm hoping this is landing. So feel free to start dropping any questions in the chat, but I really want you guys to distinguish this. When any of these are missing, people show up as what we refer to as difficult people. They're unreasonable. They seem incapable of making really high quality and intentional decisions. And that's accurate because all of these impact high quality decision making. When you don't know yourself, when you don't know what's actually important in your organization and why and where you fit into that, when you don't know where you're going and how to translate that into what you need to do this, year, this quarter, this month, this week, and today, it's going to feel like you're on a hamster wheel. When you run into a roadblock and it completely derails all of your plans, right? Because something, again, didn't go according to plan. Okay, so now I'm going to invite you to take a quick assessment, because it's going to give you a chance to understand where to start, right? It's going to give you a chance to address where to start. So I'm going to save this one for one of our questions. So I'm going to mark it for myself because I love that. But for now, I actually want you to go ahead and, grab a sheet of paper, or if you do this online, I'm going to send you one of my free courses, and you're also going to get my latest interpretation for the assessment you're about to see. So I invite you to do it online, but if you can't, you don't have the ability to right now, just go ahead and write it down. So go to bridgewellpro.com /assessment to take this online. And we're going to run through these really quickly. So I want you to just give yourself a score of 1 to 10 on each of these, being really honest. There's nothing to prove here. Okay. I want you to be really honest, because your results and how they inform how you move forward are going to be driven by the transparency and honesty and authenticity with which you answered your own questions to yourself. You don't have to out yourself here. Yes? Okay. So first, number 1, my career and leadership decisions and actions are intentional and strategic. Number 2, I don't react to other people's bad attitudes. Number 3, I have self-confidence no matter who's in the room or what's going wrong. That's a tricky one, huh? Number 4, I know exactly what's important to my organization and how I fit into that. Number 5, my good work is noticed and acknowledged. Number 6, I don't take it personally when my team, partner, client doesn't do what they're supposed to do. Okay. Now I'm going to go on to the next. I know we're going quickly. Number 7, I have a clear method for course correcting when things don't go according to plan. Number 8, I know exactly where to focus my time to excel in my current role or to get my next promotion. Number 9, I know what skills to demonstrate and to whom in order to grow my influence. I'm going to say something about influence in a second, but number 10, I'm clear about my roadblocks and triggers so they don't sabotage me. Number 11, I have a process for identifying and tackling my own blind spots. And number 12, I have a written strategic plan for my career that informs my monthly, weekly, and daily actions. I know that was fast, so grab a quick screenshot of this if you need to. I'm going to go back to the last one. So you have the first 6. You can grab that screenshot as well. Now, here's my question for you. How many of these are below a 7, right? How many of these are below a 7 for you? And you don't have to out yourself in the chat if you don't want to, but if you do, that's great too. But how many of these are below a 7? So what I want to say to you is that if you have several below a 7, that there's a very good chance that you are making decisions from below the line, right? Because those pillars that we talked about aren't stable. Those pillars aren't stable. Okay. So Margaret, I love your honesty, all of them. Okay. And that's perfectly like 100% spot on for a lot of us. You know, all or most may be below a 7 because we don't tend to think about our role as leaders or even our careers through this lens, right? Again, I told you I kind of bring a strategic lens to everything. And when we think about what's required to have real success, not only on the technical aspects of our job, yes, but on the relational aspects of our job, when we bring a strategic lens to that, we see the importance of being able to answer, yeah, I'm an 8 or 9 or 10 for all of these. Yes? So I'm going to give you a chance to start working on this immediately because, you know, your career, again, your impact, your contribution, your goals, the legacy you want to create, right? The standard you want to set, all of that is waiting for you to be able to relate with the people who are in the way. So if you've ever heard the, now I can't remember who said it, but that reference to the obstacle is the way, that is the truth here. Yes. Even dealing with a difficult boss, right? Even dealing with a difficult boss, understanding where they're coming from, not to excuse it, because I'm not about that, not to excuse it, but to no longer make their bad behavior and poor leadership choices about you changes everything. Can you guys see how that can become transformative, even if your boss hasn't changed at all and they're equally difficult or unpleasant? And that goes for anybody, obviously, not just your boss.